Greetings to those who deal in the good medicine of joy. Oh, how wonderful the medicine of laughter. Some of my most depressed and miserable times in life have been vanquished by a good laugh. Like light in the darkness, a good laugh at yourself and a good laugh at others can clean, purify, enlighten, and heal a broken heart. My mother and grandmother both had a way of using a restrained smile like medicine. So many of our heartaches and headaches growing up are self-induced and don't really matter at all in the grand scheme of things. When I would be explaining myself or griping about others, when I would inevitably come up against the cold, hard truth, I could watch either of those godly women start to hold back a laugh. They'd be trying so hard to sympathize, but then all of a sudden they would be biting back a belly laugh, and I could just see it in their eyes. And at first sight, I would get so mad, but then I too would be caught up in the ridiculousness of it all and start laughing at myself. And then we would all just giggle it out, see the mountain that I had made for the molehill that it actually was, and begin the process of healing. But not just any healing, real healing that recognizes reality instead of the phantasms which I had created in my mind. It was more than healing. It was revelation. Through laughter and through laughing, we sometimes achieve a perspective on ourselves and others that cynics and the serious will never understand and never enjoy the healing that comes from it. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." In many ways, the world has forgotten what it is to truly laugh. There are crushed spirits all around us, and their bones are so dried up, all dried up. In many cases, the bones are so dry that the initial life-giving water of laughter hurts them so badly that they will not allow the medicine to finish out its work, soften the calcified bone and tissue, and swallow them up in freedom and joy that exist just on the other side of that same pain and anger. They will not give up their seriousness, and they will not give up their egos long enough to ever allow the foolishness of their plight free them from their situation. For what could be worse than to realize that all your causes and all your crusades are dust in the wind and foolishness in the eyes of eternity? Well, I tell you what is worse, never realizing that. To be set free from the transitory in order to focus more upon the eternal is one of the main functions of true human and God-given humor. But to be fair, we must also realize that the Bible and common sense alerts us to the fact that there is humor that is harmful. I was blessed enough to be born into a house that had a great sense of godly humor. But I have also been in homes that have a real comedy problem. God and loving family use comedy and humor like a surgeon uses a scalpel. But in some homes, comedy and humor are used like a pugilist's knuckles. They are said in just the right way to deliver just the right amount of pain and camouflage it in just the right garb to make sure that the combatant never truly has to answer for their sadistic outlash. Proverbs 26:18-19 tells us that, like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death, is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, "I'm only joking," or in today's lingo, JK, JK, right? We have all met masters of this style of warfare. It is as though the perpetrator feels that the fact that their dagger is poisoned with humor makes it somehow not as evil. The truth is that using humor to harm people is not just cruel, it is the tactic of a coward. Not willing to attack head on, the cruel humorist exchanges their shield and spear for the assassin's dagger. They drop in, throw their devices at the victim, and then look around all innocent as though they can't believe that anyone took their attempt to murder seriously. They wonder to themselves, how could anyone think I'm a bad guy? I was just kidding. Proverbs 12:18 says, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrust, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Another poor form of humor is the crude or crass type of humor. Ephesians 5:4 tells us to let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. If you think about some of the worst things that our society has embraced as normal, you can probably trace back the social engineering to a comedy show. One of the most tried and true ways to get people desensitized to evil is to get them to laugh at said evil. There is another type of comedy called flippancy that, when it is combined with crude humor, are very powerful in their abilities to manipulate the minds of those who are not on guard against such things. It is dangerous to anyone and to everyone, but more so to those that have not been trained in the ancient art of girding up their minds. We will get to flippancy later, but crude humor goes without definition. We all know what it is, and we all know why it is wrong, and we all have been guilty of laughing at it. But once we become children of God, we must stop foolish and crass talking. The crass joke is not crass because of its topic, but because of how it handles its topic. Two jokes can be told about the exact same thing, but one can be loving and healing while the other is desensitizing, vulgar, and harmful to people and to culture. It makes light of serious things. It normalizes abhorrent practices. It gets us to laugh at things that should be treated with honor or things that should be treated as poison. Either way, it plants in the mind of the hearer and the teller a lie about the object in question. Jokes about the church have diminished respect for the church, while treating perversions as something light and jovial. This concept has normalized things which should not be. And we all know this. We have all seen this happen in our lifetimes. Jokes are extremely powerful. Jesus used them all the time if you know how to spot them, but his jokes were always affirming and helpful. If they did tear down something, then that something needed to be torn down. Many of our comedians nowadays are extremely skilled in the art of humor. I just wish there weren't so many of them pulling for the other team. As I sample a small section of our greatest and most influential comedians, I find that most of them use crass humor to program the masses into believing things that just aren't true. Twisting a phrase by President Reagan, I say it isn't so much that comedians are ignorant, it's just that they know so many things that just aren't so. The next type of comedy rarely gets a laugh, but it is nearly always accompanied with a smirk, as I end with Screwtape Letters. It is to be found on the face of the college professor that just made fun of someone's political leanings. It is to be found in the slightly falsetto voice of a high school teacher pushing an agenda they know mom and dad would hate and fight against with everything in them if they knew what was going on. It can be heard in nearly every single smart aleck question asked at current news conferences. Flippancy is the highest form of persuasion used by your enemy, and it is the most powerful tool wielded over the ignorant. Proverbs 29:9 says, if a wise man has an argument with a fool, the fool only rages and laughs, and there is no quiet. I was recently watching a street preacher in, I believe it was San Francisco, being tormented by a crazy, foolish woman. Each time he would calmly speak, he He wasn't out there screaming, shouting, being ugly. Each time he would calmly speak in truth and in love, she would stand right in his face, just screaming one note as loudly as she could until she had to take a breath. Ah! Only to begin screaming again once she got her wind back. Now, I realized she hated what this man was saying. I get it. But her flippant professors, her flippant school teachers, her flippant friends, her flippant life partner, her flippant parents had all taught her that she was the smartest one in the crowd and that she didn't have to listen to anyone else because she was right and they were wrong. Doesn't matter how much school the preacher had been to. Doesn't matter he wasn't being hostile. Doesn't matter anything. Doesn't matter he was being loving and kind. Folks, you all realize that shaming culture, cancel culture, and shutdown culture are all part of the Marxist handbook, tools that they use to take over a culture. And they will do it by having every unthinking, uninvested person out there feeling like they are the smartest and righteous ones in the group. And they will do it all by treating everything of honor, everything of worth, everything of tried and true moral and ethical stances, everything that experience and history tells us is valuable and noteworthy as flippantly as they can. And here is the saddest thing. Once they gain control, history shows us that the very people that they use to get into power are the first ones they get rid of to maintain that power. And it is amazing how much headway they have gained just by using the humor called flippancy. One author writes, "Flippancy, like so many other manifestations of worldliness, is a quiet killer of the soul. Like a fog in the night, it creeps in subtly." Flippancy does something miraculous. It makes the foolish feel wise and superior. Beware the flippant. And if you spot your child being flippant, draw them back to the real and the trustworthy and the holy as quickly as you can, for their sake and for your sake. Ephesians 5:4 warns us, obscene, flippant, or vulgar talk is totally inappropriate. Instead, let there be thanksgiving. Today, we will be reading chapter 11 of the Screwtape Letters. And as always, remember that we are reading from the perspective of our enemy. When they say our Father, they mean our enemy. My dear Wormwood, everything is clearly going very well. I am especially glad to hear that the two new friends have now made him acquainted with their whole set. All of these, as I find from the record office, are thoroughly reliable people. Steady, consistent scoffers and worldlings who, without any spectacular crimes, are progressing quietly and comfortably towards our Father's house. You speak of their being great laughers. I trust this does not mean that you are under the impression that laughter as such is always in our favor. The point is worth some attention. I divide the causes of human laughter into joy, fun, the joke proper, and flippancy. You will see the first among friends and lovers reunited on the eve of a holiday. Among adults, some pretext in the way of jokes is usually provided, but the facility with which the smallest witticisms produce laughter at such a time shows that they are not the real cause. What the real cause is, we do not know. Something like it is expressed in much of that detestable art, which the humans call music, and something like it occurs in heaven. A meaningless acceleration in the rhythm of celestial experience, quite opaque to us. Laughter of this kind does us no good, and should always be discouraged. Besides, the phenomenon is of itself disgusting, and a direct insult to the realism, dignity, and austerity of hell. Fun is closely related to joy, a sort of emotional froth arising from the play instinct. It is very little use to us. It can sometimes be used, of course, to divert humans from something else that the enemy would like them to be feeling or doing. But in itself, it has wholly undesirable tendencies. It promotes charity, courage, contentment, and many other evils. The joke proper, which turns on sudden perception of incongruity, is a much more promising field. I'm not thinking primarily of indecent or bawdy humor, which, though much relied upon by second-hand tempters, is often disappointing in its results. The truth is that humans are pretty clearly divided on this matter in two classes. There are some to whom no passion is as serious as lust, and for whom an indecent story ceases to produce lasciviousness precisely insofar as it becomes funny. There are others in whom laughter and lust are excited at the same moment by the same things. The first sort joke about sex because it gives rise to many incongruities. The second cultivate incongruities because they afford a pretext for talking about sex. If your man is of the first type, bawdy humor will not help you. I shall never forget the hours which I wasted, hours to me of unbearable tedium, with one of my early patients in bars and smoking rooms before I learned this rule. Find out which group the patient belongs to, and see that he does not find out himself. The real use of jokes or humor is in quite a different direction, and it is specifically promising among the English, who take their sense of humor so seriously that a deficiency in this sense is almost the only deficiency at which they feel shame. Humor is for them the all-consoling, and mark this, the all-excusing grace of life. Hence it is invaluable as a means of destroying shame. If a man simply lets others pay for him, he is mean. If he boasts of it in a jocular manner and twits his fellows with having been scored off, he is no longer mean, but a comical fellow. Mere cowardice is shameful. Cowardice boasted of with humorous exaggerations and grotesque gestures can be passed off as funny. Cruelty is shameful, unless the cruel man can present it as a practical joke. 1,000 bawdy or even blasphemous jokes do not help towards a man's damnation so much as his discovery that almost anything he wants to do can be done, not only without disapproval, but with the admiration of his fellows, if only it can get itself treated as a joke. And this temptation can be almost entirely hidden from your patient by that English seriousness about humor. Any suggestion that there might be too much of it can be represented to him as puritanical or as betraying a lack of humor. But flippancy is the best of all. In the first place, it is very economical. Only a clever human can make a real joke about virtue, or indeed about anything else. Any of them can be trained to talk as if virtue were funny. Among flippant people, the joke is always assumed to have been made. No one actually makes it. But every serious subject is discussed in a manner which implies that they have already found a ridiculous side to it. If prolonged, the habit of flippancy builds up around a man the finest armor plating against the enemy that I know of, and it is quite free from the dangers inherent in the other sources of laughter. It is 1,000 miles away from joy. It deadens instead of sharpening the intellect, and it excites no affection between those who practice it. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. Psalm 126:2 says, "Then our mouth was filled with laughter, and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them." I believe that heaven will be filled with laughter. It will be laughter that flows forevermore from the fount of joy. It will be pure and good and healing throughout all of eternity. It will not be at someone's expense. It will not be to make light of holy things. It will not draw attention to those things that should be treated delicately. It will be a healing chuckle that builds and builds and builds until we all learn that our Father in heaven is belly laughing with tears in his eyes because all his children have made it home. When we see God's plan from his perspective for the very first time, my guess is that at first we will all sheepishly look around at each other in the full knowledge that even our most beautiful imaginations cannot describe the justice, the beauty, and the joy that now surrounds us for all eternity. And when we all realize that we are all thinking the same thing, the universe will be filled with the laughter of all of God's children. God bless. And I hope to see you soon.